Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The Spa in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is Freedom Fighter. Amazing people like you share ways to ensure your freedom physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-given knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and giving a voice of freedom to those who are also looking to have their best life. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Rihanna Milne. She is a certified global life and love trauma recovery coach, a certified clinical trauma and addictions professional, a certified mindfulness coach, a #1 best-selling author, and the host of her podcast called Lessons in Life and Love. Rihanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Diane.
So you have been 21 years in practice as a licensed mental health counselor in the Palm Beach County of Florida, and that has taken you in many different directions. And I would love for you to share, I think it's so fascinating that you were the life and dating coach for the docuseries Radical Dating, Finding Lasting Love Over 40. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you got into that and what are the distinctions about love over 40?
Okay. Well, my first degree from Penn State was in broadcast communications. So I actually had a couple of TV shows. I had a model and talent agency in school for 10 years from age 26 to 36. And I always had a goal to combine radio and television with a psychotherapy practice. So that happened. And I was asked by the owner of RCI, Relationship Coaching Institute, where I went and got my certification in 2009 and 10 to be a relationship and life coach for both singles and couples, to be a part of the show. There's actually 5 coaches asked, and many contestants showed up, and it was a interview situation. And there was one gentleman there, and the question was, what do you dislike about dating? He goes, what I hate about dating is dating itself. And I said, boy, whoever gets Scott's got his hands full. Well, I was assigned Scott, and which is perfectly fine. He was a gay male for the show. There was a straight male and 3 straight women, but he also had childhood and love trauma. He grew up in a Hollywood environment. His mother was a superstar child actress. And when he came out as gay, he was not accepted for that. And his love trauma was he had a partner he really loved, and unfortunately, he was killed in front of him by a car. So he was very bitter about his losses in his life. And I was a trauma specialist, so they assigned Scott to me. And all the contestants were over 40. So Scott was the first one to get out on a date, the first one to be an exclusive with a partner, and he's been happily married now for 5 years. So that was the result of that show. And over 40, usually there is some kind of a relationship trauma beforehand, a difficult marriage or several long-term relationships that didn't work out. So over 40, they're probably beyond wanting children at that point and just looking for a partner for love, romance, and retirement. Most of the contestants were in their 40s. A couple was young 50s. So it was that age group. That's just the way the show was designed.
Right. Well, you've shared that research shows that 100% of people have childhood trauma, which is shocking in so many different ways, because there seems to be a spectrum of, maybe people who aren't as aware of what that trauma was, and it's more subconscious. And then there's some really obvious traumas that people have had as well. Being along that spectrum, how do people who maybe aren't realize that they're part of childhood trauma, how does that play out in their life?
Okay. So my experience as a psychotherapist, I've been doing this actually 22 years, and I had the chance to work with a lot of kids going through trauma. I was a trauma counselor in every school level from kindergarten through college. I worked in a mental health ward at a hospital with kids 5 through 19. Drug and alcohol facilities with adolescents was one, and women from the prison system was another. And after I experienced two love traumas, my partner said to me, I don't know why I sabotage everything I love. And my mind was scrolling through the psychotherapist DSM model handbook. And I said, I don't know either, but I have to figure it out, because I went to 7 therapist friends of mine and nobody who knew us, what he had, what led him to this secret Dr. and Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of life, where he would sabotage everything he loved. He did lose his job. There was a big community scandal. I had to go through that because I was married to him. So the first thing I did was stand up for myself and stood as my own attorney in court and annulled the marriage. And I got the annulment, which I did not realize was very rare. But with all the proof that I had, I did win that court case. And the second thing was, and I went deep into psychological research. I needed to understand, why was I attracting people who had toxic personality types, that were sabotagers. And I then developed in 2012 the childhood trauma checklist, which is an easy 10-question quiz that people can identify if they had trauma or not. Now, there's 2 types of trauma. There's big T trauma, which you said are easy to identify. Let's say you were in a car crash and you lost a limb. That is a big trauma for a child to go through. But the 100% they're talking about is emotionally tied traumas, which we call little T traumas, like ongoing emotional events, like going through verbal abuse or abandonment or being bullied over and over again in middle school or high school. So it's this toxic, ongoing emotional stress that we call little T trauma. So the top 10 traumas, this assessment tool is used around the world today. And I've been coaching people from the research. Now how many years? I started coming out with my books, Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams. That was the first part. Then I developed workbooks so that it's a very individualized system. So depending on what trauma they experienced and what severity levels, then I knew how to help them with many different types of solutions.
Right. So what can be a message to our parents out there who are raising children, doing the best that they can? And I'm sure are feeling, I mean, I have 4 grandchildren and, you know, they all have different personalities. There's different things about them. And I'm sure parents are like, oh my God, if 100% of them are going to have some sort of trauma, how can I look out for that? How can I do anything different? Is it more about the interpretation that the child has? Or, you know, how from a parental standpoint can they actually look out for this and reduce trauma for children?
In 2012, when I did the research, it was 90% admitted to having one of the top 10 traumas. 2021, the research said 100%, and that was because of COVID. We all experienced COVID. That's trauma number 9, community trauma. What impacts a community at large? It could be a mass shooting, a school shooting, a pandemic, hurricane, floods, fires, where a whole community is wiped out. So trauma number 9 around the world, we have all experienced it. And that's why I believe the numbers went up to 100%. We will see a huge impact on this in our children years later, where there might be lower trust, lower intimacy levels, fear of illness or germs. So there's going to be some emotional kickback on this when these kids become adults. Usually it shows up the most in love relationships, the unhealed traumas. For example, trauma number 2 is verbal messaging. So if you grow up watching your parents fight every time there was an issue, yelling and screaming, or they were mad at you and they'd yell at you, then you're going to be an adult who yells at your partner because that was your norm. This is like, okay, this is how we handle an issue. We scream at each other. So parents today, I do educate a lot of parents to know what are the top 10 traumas. And if there is trauma in your relationship or some, dysfunctional patterns that aren't serving you, the marriage, the relationship, or the children, learn what those are and, take action to, change those patterns. Working with a lot of kids, kids are either externalizers or internalizers. The internalizers tend to be depressed, do self-mutilation, maybe have a food addiction or go anorexic or bulimic. The externalizers are the yellers, screamers, run away from home, angry at their parents, risky sex. So kids don't have the mental capacity to really handle their emotions when they're upset.
Right.
So they need a trusted adult. And a lot of kids kind of shy away from counseling. They don't like to sit in a counselor's office. They don't like, they're looking around, oh, everyone's judging me. But they love the coaching model, especially when we do it by the internet. They're used to the internet. No one else is watching their session. They can do it in their room in private. So my teens that I work with 16 and up, they have loved the coaching model. But the important thing for parents is if you see your kids struggling, just don't think they'll grow out of it or it will go away. Our suicide numbers are way up. And so is depression and anxiety. Our teens don't know what to enter into college or what career to choose. So there's a lot going on in our world that makes our teenagers feel very insecure. Right. So if you're seeing sign in your kids, please get them help.
Right. Well, I wholeheartedly agree with this community trauma that's happened over the last couple of years, especially targeting the children and the masking of children, about them not being able to learn, seeing, facial features, the whole idea of being a community, being fearful of each other. I mean, we know now, particularly with all the statistics coming out, that children have the lowest risk of this happening, but yet they had one of the biggest impacts of them as well. In fact, even as some of these things have lifted, you still see children walking around with masks, and they're in this fearful state. It's like this trauma over the last couple of years. How can we help teachers and parents have their kids not feel so fearful and literally take off the mask to breathe fresh air, to live a normal life again and have that socialization? Because suicide and depression is super high for our kids, which I think are more dangerous than anything coming from any kind of virus.
Right. Well, I have been studying what I call the other side of the news since this whole thing began. I've been studying holistic doctors on their websites, their research, not mainstream, not CNN and other news channels that are owned by big pharma. You really got to do your due diligence and seek out the other side of the news. Dr. Joe McCullough's website newsletter, flccc.org. There's all kinds of great information about how you can protect yourself with vitamin therapy. I got COVID, and on the 4th day of COVID, I had an interview with Forbes, and they're like, "You look great." I said, "Yeah, I'm doing great for day 4 of COVID." They're like, "You have COVID?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "My ivermectin and my antibiotics worked, and they did work. They work great." Because they work, America banned them. Did that make people question, why are they banning medicines that work, that have been around for 25 years? So people have to start questioning and do their due diligence and get some education before putting unknown drugs that haven't been tested into their body. Now, everyone has an opinion on this, of course, and that's just mine. So,
right. Well, yeah. And I agree. I think at the bottom line is, you have to take some personal responsibility. You have to do your research. You have to be able to look out what's best for you and your family. If something's not in alignment, talk about triggering trauma. It's like, you don't want to just do something because someone told you to do it. Like, you really have to get clear on your body, your family, what are your values, and how do you want to live life? And, I think that when people start realizing you can't live your life in fear, right? I mean, being human's risky. You have to really measure those risks and decide, like, what are the things that you're going to be able to do. And I know you talk about like the 10 adverse childhood events that sabotage you. I'd love for you to share more about that.
Sure, I can go into them if you'd like, because people will then understand how they show up. They show up in life, love, and business as an adult. So first of all, childhood trauma goes through at least 3 generations. It has even been proven it changes gene expression for those with ancestors that were survivors of the Holocaust. So high anxiety, depression rates go down that lineage due to the gene changes. So this is real and it's serious. And if you don't heal childhood trauma, the Kaiser Permanente group with over 17,000 people show that it leads to, early heart disease, diabetes, heart attacks, extra weight gain. It's just really hard on the brain and the body. Okay. And that's where trauma is stored. So the first one is, and this is any childhood experience inside or outside of the home. So did you grow up with any addiction in the family? And their study just showed drugs and alcohol. Well, I'm an addictions counselor. I named 12 of them. So drugs, alcohol, sex, meaning you knew your parent was a cheater. It was a family secret. Porn use, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching, workaholism, and even I added the next one, social media addiction. In other words, just being on your phone or your computers all the time and not really interacting with your children. That's the first one, or
Right.
putting kids on machines all the time.
So I want to interact before you go on to the next one here, because,
Okay.
you know, we are seeing now a generation of kids that will be sitting next to each other and they're texting each other.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how just the socialization and being able to connect with people one-on-one, and how the kind of electronics is kind of a, you know, not that it's bad per se, because it obviously has its values, but in terms of how to have some perspective and boundaries around that for children, and
You
how it
have to
has an
have
impact.
boundaries. It's been proven gaming on the computer has been an addiction long ago. I actually had a 14-year-old in my New Jersey practice that as soon as his parent left for work, he cut school, didn't get on the school bus, hid behind the bush, went home all day, played his online games. And, you know, his mother would call him for dinner. He's cursing, you know, F you, leave me alone. I'll come when I'm ready. I'm not hungry. I mean, real full signs of addiction. And this has been known for years. And yeah, putting little kids on there. Yes, there's learning games. So, I mean, choose wisely, but also limit the times. You know, there should be family dinner with no machines at all. Put on some music. Take the machines, the phones away from the dinner table. You know, I mean, definitely time this out. It really is wreaking havoc on our kids' social skills, their ability to do job interviews. It's really causing a lot of trouble.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
also I'd say as a retired police officer, you know, those sites are just very open to abuses
The
and
bullying.
for children. You know, the trafficking really
Yeah.
connects with people. They say that they're other kids, but you know they're adults, and
Of
so it
course.
can be a real danger, and for people to be aware of what's happening with your kids online. So
Parents should have every password available, and it should be parent protected as well. But you're absolutely right with the cyberbullying, stalking, the sex trafficking. Yeah, it's a real problem.
yeah, got it. Okay, what's the second one?
The verbal messaging, which I went into before, but that also includes never hearing the words "I love you," never getting compliments, hearing put downs instead, like you should change your outfit. You look fat in that. There's a lot around verbal messaging. And then, you know, if your parents, like I said, were yellers, or if they shut down, they were mad at you, they didn't talk to you for hours or days to punish you, then you learn this is how we handle things by being passive aggressive. So
Got
that's
it.
number two.
Well, and there's also the comparison game, right? You know, and so it's like when and that's part of the downside of social media, is that you only see the happy, great things in people's lives, and you don't see the things behind them as well. And so, you know, for people to, and for kids in particularly, to know that they're important themselves, that they don't need to compare themselves to someone else, and to be able to make those distinctions. So I think just that
Yeah.
the verbal messaging, not just out in the world, but the verbal messaging that people have for each other as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our couples do not know how to communicate through issues. They've never been taught. It wasn't modeled in their family. It wasn't taught in our schools. So when I have couples in front of me, I have to treat three entities: partner A, partner B, and the relationship.
Right.
And what is the cycle of dysfunction that keeps going on? There's something called RRS, relationship repetition syndrome, where they break up, then get back together, and break up and get back together. Research shows an average of 7 times.
Yeah.
This is a combination of love addiction, codependency, and that comes from trauma number 5, abandonment issues. And there's 2 types of abandonment. There's fault and no fault abandonment. So a no fault would be like if a parent died early, if a parent was deployed to work in the military, or if they traveled a lot, were away from home, but that's how they supported their families. A fault abandonment would be they visited with the child, but then the couple broke up, you know, and they barely visit, they barely see that child. Or if the parent was never involved in that child's life. And there's even an emotional abandonment. The parent could be in the home, but they go from office to dinner to home office, barely see the kids, don't support them at their school activities, not involved, zone out to TV. So when there's abandonment, there tends to be codependency, love addiction, and this RRS pattern.
Right. Well, I think, I mean, I was a single parent, two daughters. I worked undercover and worked, crazy hours and those kind of things.
Wow.
And I really made an effort to be there. And I also had my parents help out a lot as well. But I think we're seeing a lot of this busyness, right? Even if people
Yeah.
work in the home where there's always something else to do. What can parents do when they feel like the to-do list never ends? There's trying to provide for your family, doing the best that you can to really kind of break some of those patterns to connect within the family.
Well, I was also a divorced single mom, paying child support and paying back my mom 200,000 that my kid's father ripped off my mother. So it was not an easy life as I was going through as a single mom, but I would carve out the best day of the weekend, weather-wise. I was in Erie, PA, which had a lot of snow in the winter and not much sun in the summer. So I'm from Philly. That wasn't the town I chose, but that's where I ended up. And I would then pick a day, and that would be Adventure Day. So I said, kids, have your rooms ready. And like sometimes we go to like Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or up to Toronto or down to Pittsburgh, or we go for a special lunch or to the zoo. We just pick something that we would have quality together time. And I was 100% really focused on Adventure Day. And it's great seeing my daughters now. I'm a grandma of 6, doing Adventure Day. And they call it the same thing. We're going on Adventure Day today. And you see my little grandkids are 8 and under getting all excited because they know that means something special is going to happen.
Right.
So, you can use it as behavioral modification, which I did for my girls. If we have a good week and you do star chart and you reach at least, the goal of 18 stars out of 30, then we will do a certain activity. So it's something they can look forward to. When they became teenagers and they wanted sleepovers, was the same thing. Before we have guests over, I just would say, how's your room? Or they would just say, Mom, check my room. Because they knew that activity was not going to happen until we could be proud that we have guests in our house.
Right.
And now I see the same patterns going on today. So
Yeah.
it's great. I mean, what you teach in your home becomes their norms.
Right. Yeah, I
So
think it's so important. I think there's also a visual cue that's helpful. And one of the things I always encourage my clients to have is a wall calendar that has the whole year. And
yeah,
because they see all of the busyness that you do, maybe you travel, you're speaking, you're doing all these things. But I had a certain color that I would be like, okay, this is our family day. And this is what we're working towards as a family to this day. And if you can do something quarterly or annually or whatever that is, but when the kids get to see, okay, in the midst of the day-to-day activities, that there's something to be able to look forward to. I think that's such an important thing for kids. So I love that you have that. So good.
And we use vacation too. I bought a timeshare early on and we would trip trade. It's like, where do you want to go? They're like, Paris. I'm like, okay, let's put on the list, and I wanted them to know other cultures and try other foods and hear other languages. I wanted them to become worldly. And they both are extremely worldly. One worked for JetBlue as a supervisor for 11 years, and the other one's a global coach. And she's out speaking all over the world. So, they became worldly. And this is where I teach the mindset for success to my clients, and especially the clients who are parents. I'm like, please teach this to your kids. Yeah. Because if you teach them they can believe in their dreams, they will, no matter what anybody says. I remember Alexi, she's now 38, soon to be 39. She, at age 5, she goes, Mom, I want to go to Africa and save the kids, the Save the Children commercials. I'm like, babe, you can do whatever you dream to do. That's a beautiful goal. I love it. So at age 20, she and her best friend went to Tanzania, Africa, find out what the needs were. They now have 21 working water wells in Tanzania. So, you teach them believe in their dreams, and there's too many other people telling them, no, that's stupid, or you don't want to do that when you get older. Believe in their dreams and they'll find a way. Yeah. You're building confidence and mindset and self-esteem from very early age, despite what the other parent is doing, because I divorced their father when they were young, 3 and 4 years old. So I knew there might be other messages on the one side, but all I knew was what can I control is my home, my environment, my messaging, our rules, where we talk through everything. Right. And I was doing a podcast with my daughter and she goes, Mom, I don't remember you yelling at us once. I said, well, the word discipline means, to teach. You're not supposed to know better. I'm supposed to teach you a better way. We all
Right.
make mistakes, so it's a whole different way of parenting. I talk a lot about that in my Live book.
Right. I love that. Well, and speaking of just creating the life that you want to live, one of the things I love asking my guests is that we live differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. What's your favorite room in your home and why?
I love decorating. When I walk in my front door, it's peaceful, it's beautiful. I use aromatherapy, low lighting. My house is decorated in white and turquoise because, as you can see, I love the ocean. It's very peaceful and therapeutic for me. And whenever I have guests, I put on like soundscapes, and they just walk in. It's like, wow. And it doesn't have to be a big house; it just has to feel special. So my environment, to have peace and beauty around me, it's also because I'm a Virgo, is important to me. It just gives me that sense of calm. So when I have a client in front of me, I can really focus on them. And, even if they're going through a stressful day, my sense of calm is there for them. Right. And I can change that whole demeanor very quickly because it's in my environment all the time.
Yeah. I
So
love.
music, aromatherapy, low lighting, especially if you have kids with ADHD, having low lighting in your home, more calm music. Because I worked with a lot of upset kids in the schools, doing positive parenting charts. So they had goals to strive for, so that they had rewards, not punishments all the time.
Right. Yeah,
Super
I think that's so
important.
important to have that distinction and how the environment that you create can make such a big difference in that. When I was with the police department, I coined the term the clutter to drama ratio, that the more clutter that
Ah,
was in your environment, the more drama you had, hence the police had to show up. And the reverse is true. The more
I
calm that
love
you
it.
create, whatever you can do in your environment, and it isn't like, a wealthy home versus a poor home. It's like any home, you can create something beautiful in it, something calm, whether it's the music, whether it's, beautiful flowers or whatever that's in there, you can create that environment that allows a child to thrive. So I love that you share and talk about that. I think it's so important.
Also in my school, it was called Miss Rihanna's Relaxation Room. So the bad kids would be sent down to my office, and I come in, I said, can I have, I'm not going to use the overhead lighting. And one of my favorite musical CDs was Louis Miguel, and his melody was beautiful. And I don't speak Spanish, but the kids would say, Miss Rihanna, put Mr. Louis on. It's like, okay, are you upset today? But they go back and it's
They
like,
know
what are
how
you
they
doing as
feel.
kids? And then I would do meditation with them and the deep breathing. And that was 2004 through 2008 when I was in the schools, in an elementary school at that time. And I was doing things that weren't even talked about in, major school environments, but it really, truly worked. And the meditation increases the alpha waves of the brain, no matter what your age. So that's more attention and focus and calm, and it lowers the cortisol level, which is the fight, flight, or freeze response. So if we can do that for our kids anywhere at the home or in the schools and teach them that early, it would be really helpful.
Right. Yeah. So good. Well, I know we're running out of time here. Are there any other of the adverse childhood events that you'd like to share?
Oh, there's 10 of them. So one of the most common is number 7, which is personal trauma. And that's if you've ever been bullied, feel different, if you are an African American in an all Caucasian school, or you're coming out as a gay or lesbian teen and you're not accepted by friends or family, or you might have been a chubby overweight child, or skinny and gawky and called a nerd. So any of that where you felt different, not good enough, that is a big one that plays in adults' minds, along with verbal messaging that you might have heard or not heard. If you didn't hear compliments, if you didn't hear I'm proud of you, those two in combination are very profound. It can lead to one, being successful in life to prove everybody wrong. Usually, students who do very well are trying to get good grades to please the difficult parent. So they learn to be successful. And that's when I have a lot of women say, well, I'm successful in business, but struggle in love. And that's because that emotional piece was never healed. That unconscious feeling inside is still going on for them. Also, it can lead to jealousy, control, not feeling good enough in your, relationships, control, micromanaging of your environment. So there's so many things that this leads to. The other traumas are, well, emotional and emotional neglect, right? Emotional neglect and the physical abuse, rape or molestation. That's a big one, of course. Being adopted, part of the foster care system, or needing to live in another household because your parents couldn't take care of you. Sibling trauma is another one. And, you can get the whole list at my website, rihanamilne.com, for free. And you can take it and explains, if you had this, then you might see that. So,
Right. Yeah.
because we don't have the time to go into it, but it's a fascinating list. And so many people said, wow, my ex said, I finally know what's wrong with me.
Right.
And
so
that
good.
was the ability for us to both heal and to find peace because, he grew up in a very toxic household. And when he understood what he grew up with and what he was doing and why it was sabotaging the life he really desired.
Right. Well, I'd
So,
like to just, touch briefly on, it seems like we're hearing more and more about bullying, whether it's in person or online or those different things. What can the child, the individual who's being bullied, what are some of the tools that they can do in those situations?
I always say, keep your kids busy. I was a big proponent of the arts. I was a model and talent agent from the age of 26 to 36, and I grew my kids up in the arts. So when they're around other artistic kids, they're involved with plays or singing lessons, dance lessons, keeping them off the computer, get them involved with different things. They shouldn't be, just sitting at the computer all day. On the weekends, have kids come over, do activities that they used to call them play dates for little kids, right? But, get them involved with things that they love and they will make the friendships around that. So always encouraging social friendships. My kids, of course, didn't grow up. MySpace was just coming around, so they weren't on that much because my kids were busy. Right. So for today, again, the best you can do is monitor the time, have the computer in a common area where you can monitorize it, have the parental codes on there. Phones are a privilege today. They're not a necessity. We didn't have phones growing up. So, if they are misusing the phones or on sites where you don't have access to them, take the phone away.
Right.
It's a privilege.
What about the classic, like in-person bullying, like on the playground?
Oh, well, there should be what I was, which was called a student assistance counselor. I did all the anti-bullying programs. Our program in the South Jersey schools was so successful, it was televised. I went into that school, it was like a war zone. So there's a lot you can do. What I did, my program was called Stand Up for Friendship. And they would pick a partner who was their bully busting buddy. So if their buddy was picked on, they'd either come get Miss Rihanna or tell the teacher who was monitoring playground or try and step in. Hey, you guys, don't fight. Is there something you want to talk about? So I went into every classroom and taught these skills. So the whole school environment changed around this program. It was highly, highly successful.
Yeah, I love that, having that buddy. That's so good. I mean, you don't think of some of these skills that, when implemented, again, it comes back to that socialization and building those friendships. And even if you had one great friend that you can turn to, whether it's someone who's experiencing depression or suicide or all of these things, it's more of who's in their court to fight for them,
to be out for each
them,
other,
to hear that, right?
Yeah. And if the student won't come, then that buddy would usually come to me. Miss Rihanna, I think so-and-so needs to talk to you. She's really been sad. And I asked her to go see you and she won't. So then I will go get that student. So it really was very helpful. In North Jersey, I worked in high school, Hackensack High School, and there was a lot of Crips and Bloods there. So it was a whole different atmosphere with bullying and stress and fear-based pressure, right? And being that a lot of people join gangs to feel love, we really just have to turn the direction to their future. What is it you want to be? Do you really want to be on the streets? What do you dream of? Let's get your goals going in that direction. Right. So it's student by student, just like for me now, it's client by client. healing the traumas they grew up with, having them understanding, know there's complete healing for childhood and love trauma, and just taking the time and the steps to take action and saying, I want to create the life I desire and have that love I deserve. And that is my goal and mission every day.
I love it so much. Well, as you know, our theme for this season is freedom fighters. So how are you creating freedom in your life today?
Personally or for my clients?
Either.
Okay.
Or both.
Again, around the motto, create the life you desire. We have a whole goal setting system, and that even includes working in fun, travel, purpose, creativity. So having freedom is really living the life you want, right? If you're under a stressful, toxic relationship, that's not the life you want. So I have to teach them to be empowered and make a plan B and plan C to get out of that and create the life they desire. That's freedom. That is empowerment. So even for my singles, I teach these skills. Again, like communication skills for couples, the dating skills nobody talks about, all based in research. There is an art and psychology to dating successfully and finding someone who's emotionally healthy, evolved, and conscious themselves. And you don't settle for less. You build your life first, self-love, self-empowerment, confidence, self-esteem. You feel amazing about yourself. And when you do, you would never settle for less. Yeah. So it's a whole different way of dating, and then asking the questions, on date 1 or 2, if that's a keeper or not, and why or why not. Right. Based around the questions and childhood traumas and how they respond. So it's a whole different way of dating. So, and knowledge is power. Absolutely. And that brings freedom.
I love it. I love it. Well, and that is so in line with our spa life of seek power always, that we have that divine power within us to make these choices, to really, trust ourselves, right? Yeah. And to really expand into who we are. So Rihanna, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom and being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Diane, for having me.
All right. And thank you everyone for being here with us. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.